is a Scimitar GTE from 1971. V6 power, lightweight body, rear-wheel drive, manual gearbox. It's everything you want in a 70s sports car. It's even got 4 seats and a radio. What's not to love? Now, if you like reviews of cars like this, then please do hit like and subscribe. Please do that because it costs nothing. It makes you feel good, and we're this close to 100,000 subscribers. Help tip us over that magic number before the end of the year. Please, that would be lovely. And this car is actually for sale at Percival Motors in Kent. If you're interested, hit the link in the description below for his website. Now, a quick word from our sponsor and on with the review.
Furious Driving, proud to be supported by Diamond Bright, protecting, cleaning and caring for the Furious fleet and for yours with 10% off using code FD10. Follow the links in the description below.
So yes, here we have the Scimitar GTE, the world's first sports hatch estate 4-seater. Not quite exactly a shooting brake, but not far off, but it is very much its own thing and kind of its own first, if you like. There'd been a Scimitar around for quite a while. 1964 the first Scimitar came out. It was a coupe initially, and later on there was also a convertible. However, things changed dramatically, and this is very much the version of the Scimitar that everyone seems to remember and picture in their mind. In 1968 the GTE was born. The Scimitar GT estate. They like very basic acronyms over there. Now, there is one thing that pretty much everyone seems to know about the Scimitar, and that's that Princess Anne had one. But that's wrong. She didn't. She had 8. 8 of them. The first one was a birthday present when she was 20 years old in 1971, and so she was a big fan of the Scimitar GTE with a very practical 4-seater arrangement and hatchback boot. So she had 8 of the things. She also had a robin and then a kitten to work on their estates. So, big Reliant fan. No one talks about the robin though for some reason, only the Scimitar. So anyway, where did it come from? What was the idea? How did it happen? Well, back in 1965 there had been a concept car built for Pilkington triplex glass called the Scimitar GTS, or Glazing Test Special. Again, they like their acronyms, and that had been designed to showcase the new glass technologies, bonding glass straight into the body, all this kind of flush fitting and curving and clever stuff. And so they built what was kind of a glass-sided, curving glass into the roof estate car thing for shows and things. Prince Philip apparently was very fond of it. But in 1967 they decided that was actually quite a good idea for a production car. So they went back to Tom Carron at Ogle Design and said, can you build an estate car type thing based around the idea of the GTS? And so the GTE was born. So Tom Carron came up with the concept of extending the roofline of a GT to create the estate, and then the bodywork maestro over at Ogle, a guy called Peter Bailey, he came up with a mock-up concept car, which was then formed into an actual working, running prototype. That was built in-house at Ogle and then driven all the way to Tamworth, where Reliance offices were, where they could take delivery of it and assess it, and they loved it. And in less than a year it went from an idea down the pub to a concept car at the motor show. So 1968 the world got their first look at the GTE. Now, to make the GT chassis fit the new longer wheelbase, Ogle had extended an existing GT chassis, but John Crosthwaite, the chief engineer at Reliant, was not happy with the idea of butchering and bodging the old chassis around. He wanted to develop his own new chassis, and using his experience from BRM, Lotus and Cooper, he came up with an all-new chassis to fit the longer wheelbase. So this is quite a significantly upgraded car. Now, although we call this a hatchback, it's not a hatchback in the sense that we understand it today, because it's not the entire back of the car. Bear in mind, this is a fiberglass shell, not a metal shell, so this is just a glass hatch, which allows you slightly low access into the back of the car. It's not the greatest amount of space to get things in, but things can go in there nonetheless. Also, quite excitingly, especially if anyone who's a Hubnut fan will recognise this as the first ever rear wiper blade fitted as standard to a British car. You can kind of tell it was an afterthought because you can't open the tailgate without actually moving it aside first. So 6 out of 10 for that one. But this was only fitted after journalists took the first cars out and complained that they couldn't see anything out the back window after 10 minutes on the road, so they had to put a rear wiper on here. There's no rear washer though, interestingly. Now, although this glass tailgate is quite thin in itself, it doesn't open out to give a lot of space, so you reach inside here, and then we've got a decently sized boot actually all the way to those rear seats, which will fold completely flat, and the armrest in the middle of those 2 rear seats is raised up to help give a completely flat bench, which is super useful. Now, under the bonnet we'll find two things. First of all, an engine, that's to be expected. Secondly, we'll find the spare wheel, which is pushed there to make more room in the back for luggage, because it's not a big estate car, it's the shooting brake style of things. But this is Ford's 3-litre V6, as borrowed from the Capri 3-litre and other notable greats, which is a great thing to put in this car because it makes it powerful, fast, reliable and very easy and cheap to maintain. It's also, you'll note, a long way behind the axle line, so weight distribution is fantastic on this thing. Light body, big engine, but the engine is sort of near the middle, rear-wheel drive, recipe for lots of fun. And this thing is pretty powerful. From the early days, these were 138 horsepower, which meant 120 mile an hour top speed and a 0 to 60 of 10.7. Later on, they got a 7 horsepower upgrade, and that bumped it to 121 miles an hour and a 0 to 60 of 8.5 seconds. So let's take a look at the interior of the GTE. With a little badge here in the centre telling the world it's the GTE, and we've got long rear glass here covering the rear seat and into the boot as well, and a tapering boot line with a little spoiler up at the top being diverted here. So we've got a little push button here and a very tight, actually surprisingly tight door handle to get your fingers through there. Inside we've got a well padded upholstered door, manual winders, I'm curious to note, and we've got quarter lights still, of course, being the 1970s. Moving down, we've got lots of soft padded vinyl, so it does feel like quite a luxurious car we've got going on here. And it's interesting the way to make more room inside the car, they've angled this panel into the door. It's quite a curious, very 1970s looking thing they've done there. It does very much look like an Ogle design thing to have done. We've got our door release just there, our door pull just there, and just some nice little lines just going on to add some little detail and interest. Stepping into the car, we cross over aluminium checker plate, and in keeping with the Capri theme, this car does actually have Capri seats fitted to it instead of the standard ones. So quite nice leather bucket seats, they add a little bit of something here. Interesting floor shape you'll notice down here. So the floor rises up in front of the seat and drops away quite significantly down underneath the pedals. So you've got quite a tall but very narrow footwell going on there, and also underneath there the ignition barrel is hiding underneath the rev counter on the bottom of the steering column, I guess because this is going to be a Ford steering column and it was designed to fit into something completely different and they couldn't work out any way of moving the steering lock. But climbing aboard, it's quite a tight fit with these big Capri seats. We've got a very nice leather steering wheel going on just here, with 3 aluminium spokes and the Scimitar logo in the centre. Now looking through that, we've got a bank of 4 black dialed, white fonted dials. So speedometer on the left, rev counter on the right, and our temperature and oil here in the centre. And being a child of the 1970s, we've got these little crystalline lenses over the lights for ignition and trafficators. I can't believe they're still calling it trafficators in the 1970s. The red ignition warning, and again trafficator for the right, and main beam. Not a lot of warning lights happening just there. We've got the tiniest little air vent just here on the right hand side, so not huge ventilation, has to be said. Our choke is lurking down here, and someone has added hazard lights to the car as an aftermarket thing, which is definitely a good idea. And moving up to the centre, we've got 3 more dials. We've got the Smith's clock in the middle, we've got amps on the left and fuel on the right, and a very period correct radio here in the middle. Interestingly, panel lights are on their own separate switch. Up above that we have got a superb T-shelf. Large, flat area, slightly padded so things won't roll away. Excellent for any kind of snack delivery you wish to partake in whilst in your Scimitar. Moving underneath that, and you'll notice the sides of the centre console are carpeted in the same thick, rather luxurious black carpet as underneath our feet, and the centre part of this very 1970s black crinkle finished vinyl, same as this padded bar here in the centre. We've got controls for our wipers, the washers, our heater fan, our lights, our little flick switches. That's quite curious, and someone's put a torch here in the centre which looks amazingly factory, has to be said. And we have these heating controls taken from someone's domestic radiator down here for the internal heating. Underneath that we've got a ashtray which looks like it's been lifted from something else. I'm sure it probably has, being a Reliant. And behind that we've got harder plastic area with a 4-speed gearbox lurking in the centre and a big manual handbrake. We've even got a luxury of luxuries for 1970 anything, an armrest with a cubbyhole pocket thing in it, which is super luxurious. Up above, this car even has a Webasto style sunroof with black fabric lining the headlining. Now, the thing that made this car really stand out was the fact it was a proper, honest to goodness, four-seater. So in the back there are a pair of actual proper black vinyl bucket seats. The legroom has been rubbed somewhat in this car by the Capri seats, but you've got armrests built into the side and you've got pretty good vision out. This is exactly what kids in the 70s would have considered pretty high luxury. And looking through into the boot, you can even see a pair of speakers in the back shelf. So we've got what I was going to call quadraphonic sound, but there's only one speaker in the front. So we have triphonic sound. Right, let's get the Scimitar out on the road and see what it's like to drive this thing. I need my sunglasses for sure. The unmistakable sound of the Essex V6, that kind of whine it has. Oh yeah, this is 1970s performance at its best. That throaty roar, little bit of a shove in your back. Smell a bit of oil, exhaust, petrol, the vinyl. Not really going terrifically fast by today's standards, but it feels like you're really on the move. That lovely snicky gearbox, switching between ratios so easily. Pedals are surprisingly heavy on this thing. Really is a lot of fun to drive. Right, let's try and get the wind noise down, open the quarter light and close the main window. Now the steering on this thing is surprisingly direct. There's absolutely no play in it at all. And you can feel the weight distribution working very well because the engine being behind the axle means there's not quite so much a force on the axle itself. So the steering is a bit lighter. Now I mentioned that pedal box was very tall but very narrow, and finding room for my toes is easy vertically. I've actually got my heels right down on the floor, my toes are just sitting on the pedals. I've got size 11 feet by the way. Not quite sure what's going on here. But side to side, it is very tight indeed. If I try and put my foot on the brake and the clutch at the same time, it does get a little bit tight. You need your racing shoes on for this. Now, this road surface is terrible, but the car actually handles it surprisingly well. John Crosswaite's experience certainly coming in handy there, making for a car that does what it's really meant to be doing. One thing this car doesn't have is power steering, which means 3-point turns are not necessarily the easiest thing in the world. But once you're actually on the move, it is deliciously smooth and easy to control. And the thing about this car was that there was no real direct competitor for it on the market. The MGC was a 3-litre straight 6, but it was only a 2-seater really. Then there was the Rover V8, 3.5-litre V8, 4-cylinder, but not really a sports car, definitely not an estate. And in terms of price, it wasn't really comparable with other things either, because it weighed in, when new, £1,799, the MG was £1,300 and something, and the Rover was also £1,700. But it was a great GT car. Absolutely made you want to throw it at the sunset, drive into the distance and enjoy every mile. fenders are mounted annoyingly far back, and being a 70s car, the indicators are on the right, but you get used to those kind of things quite quickly, although I think winding the window with the wrong hand may be the way forward just there. 138 horsepower may not sound like masses for a 3-litre V6, but there is oodles of torque and such a smooth gearbox with decent brakes. You can fling it into a corner, drop a gear and power out, and it feels just amazing. And the suspension and the chassis are sublime. You can see why people who love these cars want to keep them as a hidden gem. They don't want everyone jumping on the bandwagon and making them expensive, because this is really, really supple riding stuff that grips and floats. Oh, it's amazing. Gearbox options were this 4-speed manual with overdrive, or from 1971ish there was a Borg-Warner 3-speed, but oh, that would just ruin this car. I've got that same gearbox, BW35, in a 3.5-litre V6, and it's a dreadful unit. So this car is an SE5 variant. From 1972, or the end of 1971 really, the SE5A came out with a few upgrades. The dummy grille moulded into the front of the shell went from body colour to chrome. There were a few other small changes, notably a moulded plastic dashboard, which looked a little bit more modern. This is a bit of a 60s vibe to it going on here, really. And of course, the engine power upgrades happened as well. It's kind of hilarious to think that Reliant, the company that was churning out the almost a joke on wheels Robin and Regal 3-wheelers, were also making this incredible supercar slayer. I mean, this is as good as a lot of the 70s supercars that I've driven, which would have cost an awful lot more money. Certainly it's up there with a 70s E-Type. This ride out in this wonderful Scimitar. If you've loved this Reliant as much as I have, please hit like and subscribe, and join us again next time driving something completely